Hey, this is Tom Glavine, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on The Grueling Truth.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris back here with you again. Dry your eyes. It's okay. We're here to kind of put to bed the 2018 Major League Baseball season and, well, put the ball in play on the next 3 months of the ball not being in play, I guess is kind of the worst way to say it. But we are here to get you through the offseason. It's going to be a very busy offseason, as already shown to us by some moves that some teams have made to exercise options, move on from some players. Of course, we have a couple more managers who have been hired. Some things we'll discuss in the coming weeks as well. So without any further ado, we'll put the ball in play on this show and get ready to take you through the World Series. We called it best. It would be a 5-game series. It was a 5-game series, luckily for the Dodgers, who got the gentleman's sweep after. Well, take it back. Were we right? Because wasn't it technically a 6-game series? They played 18 freaking innings, man. I mean, it was a walk-off at the bottom of the freaking 18th. I'm just saying.
It was technically a 6-game series, I think. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair thing to say because realistically, as I'm watching that game,
by the way, 561 pitches over 7.5 hours, busting his butt behind there last night. One of the best to do it in the game. Massive, massive hats off. Congratulations and respect to that man.
Well, so I'm watching Game 3, and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to end. Nope. All right, it's going to end. Nope. And by the time we get to – and I'm on the West Coast. And by the time we get to inning 18, I'm sitting in my chair like slumped down trying to figure out where I went wrong in life and how baseball became my favorite sport. And then here comes this guy who I'm pretty sure my first impression of him that I remember was in the home run derby.
Yeah.
And my first impression was,
who the hell is this?
Yeah. Who the hell is Max Muncy?
Where have the Dodgers been hiding this guy?
Yeah, that game was just a marathon. And like you said, hats off to Teddy Barrett, who just nailed it behind the plate all night. We were
the only thing that bummed me out, there was no rain delay. Because if there had been a rain delay and they had picked back up, I actually could have woken up and driven to work and gotten to listen to the end of the game.
If there had been a rain delay, I would have stopped watching baseball altogether. That would have been the moment where I went, you know what? No, it's not. It's not worth it. I can't with these two.
So anyway,
I'm glad our pick came to fruition.
Yeah, and almost didn't. And again, we will discuss that. We're not going to do that. That's how we'll end out the show. We'll go over all that and some things we want to bring up. We think you guys might like to weigh in on. Of course, you can do that on our social media pages at OO Left Field on Twitter, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. Just search that, like the page, message us whenever you guys are interested. We message back as often as we can. Always enjoy talking to you guys. But we need to start over on the East Coast with something that is, well, it's a move out of the National Basketball Association. Magic Johnson, one of the owners of the Dodgers, hired a player agent to be the GM of the Lakers this past year. Well, the Wilpons have decided, you know what? What the hell? Let's try it too. Brody Van Wagenen, a player agent from CAA Sports, their baseball division, who had clients by the names of Jacob deGrom, Yoenis Cespedes, Noah Syndergaard, Jason Vargas, Todd Frazier, is now the GM of the Mets. Now, if something that I just said sticks out kind of funky, well, that's because those 5 names I mentioned all happened to be playing for the New York Metropolitans this past year. And now their agent, former agent, is sitting on the opposite side of the table in negotiations. Chris, this is a move that has not been taken well by the MLBPA or the commissioner's office, and this sets a really weird precedent going forward for every team in baseball.
To quote Daniel Epstein from SB Nation, it literally comes out of left field.
Hey, we didn't do it. We didn't do that.
Because he represents Yoenis Cespedes, the left fielder of the New York Mets.
That would be more apropos if they hired Cespedes as a GM, wouldn't it?
I don't understand this move. Is Van Wagenen a strong negotiator? Obviously, he's a player agent. Is that how he got his job? Did he talk his way into this job? Did he offer to reduce their payroll?
Well, reports said that actually the Wilpons reached out to him for assistance in the GM search. Because remember, Ben Cherington, I believe, of the Cubs, was a name that the Mets really were interested in. Apparently, Cherington turned him down. And it ended up being one of those things of, well, we want your help. See if you can kind of guide us in a certain direction. And it went from that to, want the job?
I don't get it. I don't understand the mindset. Now, if maybe an argument that could be made is that the Mets are trying to do something, anything, right? Even if it's something crazy, and maybe crazy works. I mean, crazy got the Lakers LeBron James.
Well, crazy works. We've seen proof that crazy works. The problem, I think, is that crazy isn't consistent. Right?
You have met my ex-wife.
But, you know, I'm thinking of the word. I'm intrigued. That's I'm intrigued by the hire. I think what the Mets are doing, it makes sense in a way that, all right, look, you've had Alderson there for a long time, kind of a, not baseball royalty, but you know, I mean, a baseball lifer, been around the game for an extremely long time. And again, our thoughts and wishes to him on his continuing battle with cancer. But it's, well, Chairman and CEO Fred Wilpon said, quote, high character, blend of analytics, scouting, and development ideas is what Van Wagenen brings to the job. And maybe that's what it is, right? They want someone who can bring you that blend of numbers, but the difference here is that he has no baseball experience aside from representing players. So granted, yes, I mean, I think we can safely assume analytics is part of his job. It's how he goes ahead and spins the positive aspects of his clients. But
he's the head of their baseball department, the CAA too. He's the head of the CAA's baseball department. Not just a player manager, but he's also the head of the baseball department.
Right.
The baseball division. But here's the thing, and this is where it starts, that logical thought process starts to break down, because he doesn't have access like other GMs have access. He doesn't have scouting report access like another GM has access. He doesn't have analytic numbers access like a GM has access. And while he may be good at using the type of reporting and numbers that he does have access to for his spin, he is about to get access to a whole new world of scouting reports and data analytics that he is going to have zero idea how to quantify.
And that's maybe the positive here is you have a young guy like Mickey Callaway. A young manager. I think the difficulty here is you have a guy who's been around the game for a long time as a very successful pitching coach. This might have been one of those moves that made sense when you hire a guy like with Charlie Montoyo in Toronto, a brand new skipper, really kind of getting the chance to get out there and see the game from that perspective. I don't know if this is a marriage that is meant to last. At the same time, I don't think you or I think that the marriage of Mickey Callaway and New York is meant to last. We didn't think it would last this year, and I'm actually curious to see what this relationship could do, because not having a GM and a skipper on two different pages is a very, very dangerous equation for a ball club. And right now, the Mets are searching for an identity for this ball club.
I agree, and they're also looking for a guy who's going to be able to take them through the rebuild that they need. There's no other way through than a rebuild in New York. And I just don't know if a guy who is now going to be, for all intents and purposes, changing allegiances.
Oh, absolutely. It's already been reported, and Buster Olney of ESPN, someone obviously who we both enjoy the reporting and listening to, already said that this is, quote, bizarre and inevitably problematic, close quote, but that because of the prior relationship with DeGrom and Syndergaard, that Van Wagenen will not be able to participate in arbitration hearings for DeGrom this offseason. You have hired a general manager who cannot be in the room, cannot be there to participate when one of the biggest pieces of your, for all intents and purposes, who we expect to be the National League Cy Young Award winner, and he can't be in there. He can't be in the room.
Right. And that's problematic. Not only is it problematic for the Mets, it's problematic for the players as well. Because there's having a personal relationship like that, especially a personal relationship that has been built around their financial best interests, and then not just ending that personal relationship, but turning it on its head, is going to create issues.
Right. It's the idea of attorney-client privilege ending because you're no longer his client. Because right. You've gone ahead and gone somewhere else, and now I can spill the beans.
Can you imagine if an attorney were to leave his career as a defense attorney and become a prosecutor mid-trial?
Right.
This is akin to that. He would not be allowed, obviously, to participate in the trials of any of the clients that he represented ever.
Right.
And so he's lost his effectiveness. As a GM, he's losing his effectiveness. There are 5 major players on this team who he cannot negotiate with.
And on top of that, I say this, and I can't say he doesn't have an idea because I don't know the guy. But it is very safe to assume that he's not going to have any idea how to put together an effective staff. He needs to have a scouting director. He needs to have VPs of player personnel and baseball ops and all these different other options. Now, granted, some of those are going to come from the ownership on down, but he's going to need a staff around him. I mean, who are you going to rely on? Because right now, you've been the enemy of 29 other men that work in this. Now, granted, you might be like a Scott Boras, who guys, I remember seeing an interview and they asked him, what's it like negotiating with him? He said, it's fine. It's actually enjoyable because Scott knows what he wants. We know what we want, and we have dialogue. And if we get to a point where we can't agree, okay, but he's flexible. He knows the business. This guy doesn't know the business of being a GM yet. So how flexible will he be? When are we going to see him really flex those muscles, to use the same word again, as a GM and making a deal? This could turn out to be huge. He could make deals that you go, man, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden, holy crap, this makes a ton of sense. he's going to know how to backload contracts and move things around. And, granted, everything is guaranteed, but he's going to know how to make that work. I don't know, man. This just makes the Mets look that much more
desperate.
Yeah. And that wasn't the word I wanted to use. I think desperate's a great word. They're a team who's grasping. They are in free fall, and they are grasping for any branch or vine or anything to hold on to and break their fall.
Right. Exactly. And to be honest, I think this is the wrong twig to step out on. I can't imagine this being the move that gets the Mets back into position to be relevant.
And maybe that was the idea of a rebuild. Is, hey, you know what? We don't, we aren't going to be able to have a huge veteran presence here, and they want him to make deals with guys to go ahead and bring in as much talent as they can for as good a price as possible. And as far as that goes, he might be a very effective piece of that. So, we'll see. We reserve judgment, but it's definitely different. On a lighter note, the skipper of the Oakland A's, a guy who we both made mention of as far as being a AL Manager of the Year candidate, along with Billy Beane and David Forst, the latter two, the executive VP of baseball operations and the general manager, respectively, all have received extensions from the Oakland A's. It has kind of been extension week and option week, right, so far for Major League Baseball. A lot of that we won't get to, but some big ones that we do want to talk about. And, I mean, not much surprise there, right? Melvin's going to make about $3.5 million per year through 2021, puts him at one of the higher pay rates for a sitting skipper. Man, I mean, 97 and 65, good on them. And again, I think this makes sense. And if you're Bob Melvin, you sure as hell can't rest your hat on that, because we saw what happened to Paul Molitor in Minnesota. Had a great year last year, gets a 3-year deal, out on his butt at the end of this year. So it's great for him, and I hope he gets a chance to stick out that extension and do some more good things. I think the difficulty here, honestly, to me, the difficulty here is the extension of Billy Beane. It's great what he did. It's great what happened this year, right? We love it. It was a great story. But is it going to be like what's happened before, where they have a great year, they get some great, some capital, some equity in that lineup, and then it's, we got to sell while it's good, and then they go back down. And that's going to be, I think, that's what I hope we don't see from a guy like Billy Beane.
Well, and from the ownership of the Oakland Athletics as well, because we're talking about a guy who can only do what he can with the money that he's allowed to spend. And sometimes he gambles and it makes sense, and sometimes he gambles and it doesn't. And sure, a couple of times he's managed to put these, Moneyball teams together that go pretty far and do a lot. And the downside is that, he gets a couple of big names. I really worry about the Sean Manaeas and the Chris
Davis.
Chris Davises of the Oakland Athletics, because those guys' stars are on the rise. And when the A's get to a point where they're like, hey, we need to fill our farm system back up, and we don't want to pay multi-million-dollar contracts, those guys are going to get dished for prospects.
Well, and I'm going to be honest, and we'll see what happens with the offseason moves, but I think already that we're looking at a year next year where the A's are going to be probably a 4th or 5th place team, right? Because, I mean, they had a pitching staff that was held together by duct tape and super glue, it seemed. Manaea is out all next year with the shoulder injury. So, you have a pitching staff that is it's very veteran, and it doesn't seem, at least right now, they have much to fill those gaps in. So they're going to be looking at almost entirely new pitching staff next year, and that's going to be very hard for them to sit on. And we'll see what Ausmus does. But I think it's a possibility that we could see them drop back down to a sub 500 team if they can't go ahead and make the moves to get a pitching staff that, you can't bank on Edwin Jackson, Trevor Cahill, Brett Anderson, and the like, or guys like Matt Fiers to continually pull this team into, a 97 and 65 record. The World Series champion Boston Red Sox exercised an option over some guy named Chris Sale. Not really big news there, but they felt, I guess, with the World Series that it made sense to, reward some smaller name players in the organization. So the Chris Sale, one of the guys the Red Sox went ahead and chose to exercise a club option on.
Who?
Yeah, Chris Sale.
Oh, I don't know that I've heard that name much in the last, 3 hours.
Man,
obviously,
I had the whole thing ready to keep going, and oh nope, he went ahead and he got off one exit too early. Okay, we're moving on from the joke.
Obviously this is the right move. Who doesn't extend Chris Sale? Just like who doesn't extend Madison Bumgarner? I mean, the guy's basically free.
Yeah.
So, which the Giants did. Pablo Sandoval is the one that kind of makes me go, really? But he's also basically free.
Dude, yeah.
The Red Sox are paying for that guy.
He is, but I mean, for the most part, I'm not saying he's of old, but I don't think Panda had the absolute – I mean, he didn't have the worst year of his career. He had 248 this year. 248, 9 figures, 40 ribs in 92 games.
He had to come back to San Francisco to do it. I think that's just where he belongs.
Yeah, I think he's just comfortable there.
Yeah. But this is obviously the right move to keep Chris Sale. Chris Sale was a lights-out pitcher. He obviously, all things being equal, he's definitely a guy that you look at who's going to be looked at for the Cy Young.
Often. Let's go ahead. Yeah, definitely not a one-time deal. I don't believe.
No, I think that I'm really excited to see how far this kid's come. I mean, from where he was 2 years ago to where he is now, just as a player, not as a pitcher necessarily. He's always been a good pitcher.
Sure.
It's just who he is as a teammate, who he is as a member of an organization that's functional, and he's come a long way.
Yeah, he has really
matured.
Yeah, he's really shredded that old pick, kind of the old way that people saw him.
God, I was trying not to say it.
I know, and I can tell you're beating around the bush. I'm like, no, I can't let that one. I mean, come on, man. We're going on vacation for a couple of weeks after the show. I can't let that go.
To shreds, you say?
Yeah.
No, he has, and he's come a long way as a human being. And it was incredible watching him in Game 4, in Game 3.
Yeah,
four. In Game 4, watching him in Game 4 in the dugout.
Oh yeah, when he just absolutely went
hyping people up.
Yeah,
and then doesn't take the ball in Game 5, which is, I think you and I both went, huh?
Yeah, that made no sense, and man,
it worked out beautifully.
And we'll touch on, I mean, how big a moment that was for one individual with that choice. But yeah, obviously it makes sense for Chris Sale. I mean, like you said, he's 372 a third innings and a 2.56 ERA since he moved to Boston. Certainly had a Cy Young caliber year. I think you and I, for the most part, if it wasn't going to be Blake Snell, it's a good possibility it's going to be Chris Sale. We'll see what happens with that. I'm a little surprised they waited this long to make the announcements, but they, hopefully the next couple of weeks we'll have that. I will
I think they said mid-November. So.
Yeah, I will have the computer just in case that they spring it on us while I'm on vacation and I have to come back from vacation a little bit early so we can do the show. But yeah, it makes sense for that. And again, like you said, makes sense for Mad Bum and Sandoval. Bumgarner, $12 million a year. They could have bought him out for 1.5. Why? Did he pitch great this year? No, but he had the dirt bike accident. What you hope is at least.
Oh, he had the hand.
Wasn't the dirt bike this year too?
No, that was last year.
Oh well, it's the same thing.
He had the comebacker in the hand this year, and they put him out for 2 months.
That's right. It's one of those things right now where some freak things have happened. He's still a really good pitcher. He's a much better postseason pitcher than I think he is. Regular season. He's still a very, very good pitcher in the regular season. But absolutely makes immense sense to re-sign him or to option on him, because then if you decide you want to move him, hey, he's at a good bargain for whoever's going to get him. Probably looking at just over $6 million or just under $6 million, depending on when the trade deadline is in 19, and you try and get something back for him for a team that, if you're a team making a playoff push and you need somebody. Bumgarner with that resume of what he does in the postseason, how does that not make him the biggest candidate if it comes down to that? And we both hope it does not.
Right.
In your neck of the woods, a certain guy named Paul Goldschmidt has been picked up for his option, a $14.5 million option by the Diamondbacks in a year that still saw him hitting .290. A 922 OPS, hit 33 home runs, only drove in 83. His lowest number of RBIs since 2014, where he hit 69 or drove in 69, but only played in 109 games. The most comparable year would have been 2012. His second year in at 145 games, drove in 82. So a bit of a down year as far as the run production goes, but still looked good. On his extra base hits, had 172 total hits, 35 doubles, 5 triples, and 33 round trippers to go along with 7 stolen bases. He is what he is. I mean, he's usually right around a walk to 2 strikeouts to every 1 walk, 90 walks to 173 Ks. It's about average for him, and that's okay. I mean, he's a power guy. But a power guy who, when he's on base, is actually makes you have to be concerned for what he's going to do. And that's a very, very important piece of what the Diamondbacks need. And again, I think like with Bumgarner, if you want to move him, you can move him at a pretty good price and get something back for him that's worthwhile.
So I like this move based solely on the idea that Paul Goldschmidt needs to be traded.
But I'm going to caveat that because I believe you are saying that more so not as an indictment to his play, but an indictment on the team as the team overall as it is currently constructed.
Right. Paul Goldschmidt needs to be on this team's roster at the beginning of the season. Well, he needs to be on the payroll because his trade stock is high. There are teams in the league that need solid play at first base. He is a solid defender at first base, 3-time Gold Glover.
Boston?
Yes.
That's scary to say. That's scary to think about.
Boston, LA, I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but
I'm talking about the Angels or the Dodgers, because you have Bellinger at first for the Dodgers.
No, yeah, the Angels, sorry.
Okay.
But that's a team that's looking for pieces to put around Mike Trout. And there are places that Paul Goldschmidt can go, and the Diamondbacks will set themselves up pretty well in a rebuild, which is what this team needs. pretty well for a rebuild for the next 4 or 5 years. You can get enough back from the right team for a Paul Goldschmidt to set yourself up. Correct me if I'm wrong, but do you know of any teams in the league who need a first baseman that don't want a guy who's a 3-time Gold Glover who hits 290 and 33 home runs in a year, in a down year?
Yeah,
no,
I
don't either.
Yeah, and it's funny because honestly, I was going to open up this segment talking on him with, a year that wasn't his best, and I go, oh, he hit 290. Never mind.
He's 7 points below his career average. But he hit 2 more home runs than his career average, than his 162 game average.
Right.
Still putting the bat on the ball well. Had a really, really slow start this year. And had a really, really slow start last year. But we're talking about a guy who was hitting 115 in May.
Right.
And ended the season at 290.
And I think that's where the question becomes, and we'll discuss this obviously much more in depth in the next couple of months. We'll do our team by team breakdown. But you look at this, his yearly average, obviously, saying 162 games. He hasn't played in the 162 games, but we'll use that as a ballpark estimate. Obviously, it's 175 hits. Well, he had 172. So the question then becomes, either was he not coming through in the clutch, which I know you hate that term, but it's the best, or was he not getting any support in front of him to actually drive guys in? And I think for the most part, it was probably the latter.
Right. I agree.
And granted, having Pollock and Peralta and those guys out with injury, the wrist injury and different things, obviously Marte not doing that affected it. But it was a year where, hey, he did his job, but nobody else was there for him to go ahead. He couldn't do the JD Martinez thing, right? Like we said, like you and I argued, well, if Betts isn't on base, JD's numbers aren't as high, and it's a round. And this is kind of the same idea of nobody got on base. His numbers don't look as impressive as they should.
Well, let's look at who's around him. Nick Ahmed, 290 OBP. Ketel Marte, 330 OBP. Gerard Dyson, 280 OBP. Alex Avila, 290 OBP, 299 OBP. Even guys like Chris Owings, 272 OBP. I played 106 games. Daniel Descalso, 350, one of the betters.
Yeah, the Alex Avila move did not bear the same fruit that I thought it might when they signed him in the offseason.
They're another one of their catchers, John Ryan Murphy, got on base at a 244 clip. I don't see how these guys are putting him in a position to do well. You got a couple of guys on here, right? David Peralta, who got on base at a 350 clip. Your AJ Pollock. AJ Pollock is a guy that you expect, hey, this guy's going to get on base, right? No, 313 or 316. So, yeah, I think it is more of the latter, that he wasn't getting the support that he needed, isn't getting the support that he needs. And I'd like to see to be honest, I'd like to see Paul Goldschmidt, as much as he's a staple member of the Arizona Diamondbacks, I'd like to see him go to a place where he's going to be successful.
Right. And again, I mean, and it is. I think it you certainly have to grab the option, and you figure out where he's going to go. And I think if they do move him, you have to try and move Greinke. I mean, like you said, this isn't a retooling. They need to figure out what they're going to do.
Greinke also needs to go.
Yeah.
Needs to go.
So that's something that we will certainly discuss as the off season progresses. But now let's go ahead and let's get into what everybody wants to talk about. Right, the Fall Classic 2018 World Series comes to an end. the Boston Red Sox with a 4-1 series win. It should have been a sweep. The Dodgers looked massively outmanned, outgunned. They had a bullpen that you and I both thought that might have been one of the reasons they held on, and they looked absolutely inept. They couldn't get guys out. Kenley Jansen was obviously spent. You try and run him through two innings, whatever it was, 6 or 8 outs for a save. He can't hold it. It was a World Series that was, I hate to say it, I think will be largely forgettable.
Yes, I think so. Here's my problem with the World Series this year. It was a lot of fun to watch in the 6th and 7th innings of most games, or where the action happened. Right, you have Game 3, Game 4. It is you have Yasiel Puig hit that 3-run shot, make it 4-1. We think, okay, I guess this is a new series, and then almost predictably, the bullpen comes out for the Dodgers and just literally drops the ball.
Yeah, Steve Pearce goes, you know what? I'll take that one. Then in Game 5, he said, I'll take that one.
I need another one.
Measure, I'll have a third.
And Pearce, again, in another World Series, another guy who I go, who is the World Series MVP? I feel like this happens every year. I feel like October is the time when unknowns or lesser knowns become hugely successful. These odd storylines that happen in and around the World Series occur, and we get some guy who we look at each other and go, who's that guy again? Because I don't know that I'd heard the name Steve Pearce more than 3 times.
Well, here's a crazy one. The World Series MVP was a piece that the Dodgers traded for from the Blue Jays for cash.
Right. And
a minor leaguer. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll try that guy.
There's a couple of guys who didn't look like they were going to make rosters this year who were on this World Series roster that were essential guys. And all of the people that you and I heap praise on and said this, it's going to depend on Xander Bogaerts getting on base and Mookie Betts hitting well. And, JD Martinez is going to have to knock the ball over the wall a whole bunch of times. And nope.
None of that I don't think he even hit a home run, did he?
Yeah, he did.
I can't remember if
he hit the solo shot to make it 4-1.
In game. That's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yep, that's right.
But Mookie Betts hit that 2-run shot.
Kind of proves a point of how non-memorable the series likely is.
But Mookie Betts hit that 2-run shot in game 4 to kind of blow it wide open, and he had gone 0 for 12 prior to that. And the only thing that I think that we got right about prediction was, and we didn't even get it all the way right, was this series is going to hinge on the performance of Clayton Kershaw. And it did. In a big, big way.
Yeah.
Clayton Kershaw had to come out and once and for all silence his postseason critics. And he got the yips again. That's the only thing I can attribute it to. This is one of the best regular season left-handed pitchers in the game, maybe ever.
I think I think saying ever is a pretty fair quantifier at this point.
We're talking about a guy who gets on a list of guys with names like Sandy Koufax. But the difference is that Sandy Koufax could pitch that way in the World Series, in the postseason. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept the apologists anymore. I'm not going to listen to the apologists. I'm not going to listen to the excuse makers. I'm not going to listen to the defenders.
It's time to have our Bryce Harper moment.
Yes. It is. This is who he is. He is an excellent pitcher for 30 or 31 games. But I don't know if it's a mental block. I don't know if it's a fear. I don't know if he's inside of his own head. But Clayton Kershaw is a liability in the playoffs.
Is he overthrowing? Because it doesn't.
I haven't seen that.
That's what, and that's what I'm saying. You don't see it physically. You don't see it change mechanics.
You don't see it in his velocity, right? Now, if Clayton Kershaw comes out,
are off, or
if Clayton Kershaw comes out in the third or fourth inning and grooves one in at 97, I think maybe Clayton Kershaw is overthrowing. But you didn't see that. 94, 95, just like he always does, just like he always has. It all looks the same. It all looks like Clayton Kershaw. But you ever notice one thing about Clayton Kershaw in the postseason that doesn't look like Clayton Kershaw in the regular season?
His ERA.
Fair. The look on his face.
He looks more pained.
Right. And he looks lost.
Deer in the headlights?
Yes. He looks like he is afraid. And I think maybe he's one of those guys that when they get to somewhere that's especially a winner go home sort of situation, he is afraid that it's him that's going to make the mistake, and then it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe I think at some point it's just I wouldn't say afraid. I think it's kind of that deer in the headlights look of just, hey, here we go again, and it's that pressure of, okay, you know what, you'll appreciate this. I think this is an analogy that works best for you. Clayton Kershaw is Steve Young with the monkey still on his back.
Right. He's Steve Young. He's Steve Young prior to the 1994 Super Bowl.
Yep. I mean, that was one of the best. It was the best announcement I could make. I thought that you might kind of gravitate to because of obviously your fandom of the Niners. But, I mean, yeah, man, at this point. So now comes the question. At the time of this recording, as it is All Hallows Eve, and about 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So in 26 hours, 5 minutes, and change, Clayton Kershaw has to make a decision. Does he opt in for $32 million or opt out of his contract? And if he opts out, where does he go? It's a heavy question.
It is. I don't. Oh, man. What? I don't think that Clayton Kershaw needs to be in Los Angeles. I'm not sure that Clayton Kershaw wants to be in Los Angeles. despite the success he's had there, despite the home he's found there, despite how well received he is with the fans, to put it mildly, I think Clayton Kershaw wants to go to a place where he is not the only ace, where he's not the only person that you can look at and say, okay, well, there's one win. Because Ryu is not the guy.
Is Buehler. Did Walker Buehler have a coming out party in the postseason that makes you go, oh?
You mean we're going to put Walker Buehler on in the number 2 slot behind Kershaw?
You could put him 3, especially. I mean,
well, that's where he was. That's where he's been for the postseason. I don't know about. I want to see him. I want to see more. I want more of a sample size.
That's fine. That is why I will predict that Kershaw will re-sign or will opt in this year. But we still don't know what happens with Dave Roberts, right? He has a $1.1 million option for 2019, but he, I think, wants a new contract, and that is still up in the air. I think depending on what happens there, because we don't know the relationship there, and I'm not – we'll get into Dave Roberts in just a minute. I think Kershaw opts in this year, gets a feel for where this team is, where they're going, what's going to happen. And if they look worse than this year or make it 3 in a row of back to the World Series and they lose, he's gone in 2020. He will opt out of the final year and he will go chase a ring. Because he needs that vindication and validation.
Otherwise, to continue the football analogy, otherwise he becomes Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, Warren Moon. A guy who's going to go to the Hall of Fame.
Well, and Moon came in late. I wouldn't say, but yeah, I mean that's a guy who was
a guy who is a Hall of Fame caliber pitcher. All three of those names are in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
A Hall of Fame caliber pitcher who could not get it done in the postseason. If that happens, despite, and I know it's not as prestigious as the batting title is, but despite being a Triple Crown winner, despite being a Cy Young Award winner, despite being an MVP, which a pitcher as an MVP is probably a bit more prestigious than a position player because it happens so rarely.
Right.
But despite being a Gold Glover at the position, despite being holding the ERA title 5 times, I mean, you look at that. You look at the list of accolades that this person has had poured upon him or earned. He's earned these accolades. And you say, 2.39 ERA, 153 and 69, a whip of 1 for his career in 3,000 innings almost, or 2,100 innings almost. That's a Hall of Fame pitcher. And then you scroll down to his postseason pitching, and you say, who is this? Who is this person that is taking over the body of a man who has put up these kind of stats? 4.32 career ERA in the postseason. 9-10 in 152 postseason innings spanning 15 series. He's given up more home runs than any pitcher in the World Series in Major League Baseball history. Who is this guy? I don't think he goes in on the first ballot. I don't think you can justify it.
Well, and here's, and you mentioned the postseason homers. He has given up the most home runs in a postseason elimination game in history. I mean, think about that. In the games that your team, it's win or go home. You need this win to stay in, and he's allowed the most home runs ever. And we've talked about this, and we have to bring it up. The Hall of Fame is it encompasses everything, right? This isn't a season award that covers only the regular season. This covers your whole career. Is it a step to say that Kershaw might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer if he can't win a ring? Yeah, it can be a step. But to say that Kershaw might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer, if he continues to have this kind of, and what was it? Was it like 23 or 24 different postseason series, something around there? And he continues to sport these numbers, and we expect to see him in more postseason series.
He's been in 15 postseason series.
15. Okay, thank you. That's right. It was like 7. It was 7, 6, and 3, or 7, 6, and 2. That's right. Thank you. Right. So if he makes it to 20, and these numbers stay ballooned, then no, I don't think it's a stretch to say he might be a second ballot guy, not a first. And call us crazy. Call us out on social media. Guys, we'll talk. We're happy to talk with you guys. You know, we enjoy the banter. Just keep it fair with us. You know, keep it respectful. But do you think we're wrong? Does Kershaw's legacy stay set even with a stain like this in the postseason? On the backside, and I mean, let's be, we don't need to get too much. We don't really need to break down game by game. Obviously, I mean, guys, I'm sure y'all watched it, and if not, MLB Network is still replaying a bunch of them. But there was. So we talked about this with the Rich Hill. Did you hear the story on the whole Rich Hill debacle as to why he got pulled when he did by Dave Roberts?
So what I was told was that Rich Hill stood up in the dugout and talked to Dave Roberts. He came to Dave, not the other way around, and said, "Keep an eye on me." And then as soon as he got into trouble, they yanked him. So and he didn't even really get into trouble.
So Roberts walked out there. He walked the leadoff guy, I believe. And John Smoltz made an interesting point on this, but he walks out there.
Oh, right. And he didn't even wait for him to get on the mound. He just tossed the ball to him.
He put the ball in his hand and walked away. And Roberts said, well, I was going out there to talk to him. And then Hill said, well, I wasn't going to show up my manager and argue with him, so I gave him the ball. And it was one of those that Robert said, I wanted him to convince me he was okay to stay in. And John Smoltz said that Bobby Cox had a walk. You could tell the walk when it's, you're out, you're done, I don't care, save it. And then there was one where was like, okay,
I bet Bobby Cox had a walk.
Yeah. All right, I got to, and you had to make him believe it, a la John Lackey, who I asked that same question to earlier this year.
I bet umpires would say that Bobby Cox had a walk too.
Yeah, he did. Back to the clubhouse the most times in history.
I bet Bobby Cox had a walk that umpires looked at him and went, "Oh God, I'm going to toss him. I'm going to have to toss him. Look at him. I'm going to have to toss him."
But I asked you this question Now, granted, Bellinger did not. Again, Bellinger is in the same boat early that Kershaw's in. A guy who feels like he presses during the postseason. Well, in the World Series, won MVP of the LCS and then just fell flat during the World Series. But I asked you this question, and I think it's worth putting out there. Was there paralysis by analysis? Was Dave Roberts neutered by analytics in Boston, where he trotted out all righty lineups, and the three best home run hitters on that team, in Jock Peterson, Max Muncy, and Cody Bellinger, did not start in Boston?
Yes. Absolutely. 100% yes. And I'll explain quickly my reasons for saying that. After Game 2, Dave Roberts sat at the press table and said that his all-righty lineups have hit very well against left-handers in the past. And so it made sense to start them against lefties in Games 1 and 2 of the World Series. That is the corporate line. That is something that somebody in the front office told him to say. How do I know that? Because Cody Bellinger played 162 of 162 games, 163 games this season, which means at most, Dave Roberts was able to play an already lineup one time because Bellinger has to play 5 innings for it to count as a game played. Which I learned when Cal Ripken Jr. was trying to become the Iron Man. So if Cody Bellinger played in almost every game this season, with the exception of one, can somebody tell me which game they had an all-righty lineup in? Because I know it wasn't 163 because Max Muncy played in that game, as did Jock Peterson. So if you never trotted out an all-righty lineup, why would you sit there and tell the press that you did it because it had been successful in the past?
Because, yeah, exactly. And that was, it felt like, I didn't get it, man. And I'll tell you why I asked that question. I mean, obviously, you know, but you're playing in Fenway Park that has this big freaking thing in left field. Nicely colored. Huge. Yeah, it's huge.
It's a great wall. It's huge.
I mean, we're not in China, but okay. You can't see the green monster from space, but if you could, I can imagine, like, hey, can we go in geosynchronous orbit and watch the baseball game for the next 3 hours? That'd be awesome. Anyway, I digress. But you also have an immensely short. Okay. You know what? Short porch doesn't even fairly describe Boston and Fenway Park's right field. I mean, you can hit a line drive in the right field line and bounce it over that wall for 2 bases. And to not have the guys in that lineup who are your pull guys, I get it. They might pull it into the shift, whatever. Okay. But if you can get a hold of one and poke it out that way, you got a good chance of it getting over the damn fence and putting a couple runs across the plate.
Yeah. And you know what you don't have a good chance of?
Winning the World
Putting
Series.
one over the monster.
Yeah.
I mean, you are taking bats out of hands. Guys who can hit the ball over the fence are now being asked to hit it over the largest obstacle in Major League Baseball. Well, maybe not the largest obstacle, I think the largest obstacle in Major League Baseball is that abomination in center field in Miami, because that has to be distracting.
But that's beyond the field of play.
I still think the distraction factor makes it the biggest obstacle.
I think Fenway is the biggest live ball obstacle, but second only to Aaron Judge. Sorry to use those two in the same sentence if you're a Boston or a Yankees fan, but I mean, let's be honest.
You're right, because in New York in New York's in the ballpark in New York, you know what I'm getting at. In Yankee Stadium.
Oh, okay, there we go.
They have
No, I didn't. No, I did not.
They have a short porch out there and right, and it's got a low wall. But then they have a 6'7" right fielder who, by the way, jumps like a basketball player, in case you didn't know that, who can definitely rob home runs.
Yeah, he has hippie hops.
I will say this, though. Mookie Betts impressed me with his jumps. With that almost home run with the fan interference. Remember we had that discussion about whether or not that was fan interference? In the ALCS.
Houston, yep.
Betts impressed me with his hops, because that's a 16-foot wall.
Yeah.
In
Houston, yeah.
In Houston.
But no, I think I'm sorry,
it's a 12-foot wall.
Right. But it's that feeling that Roberts just he was overruled, and that is where I have said before.
So let me ask you this.
I will say again, analytics has a place in baseball, but so does your gut as a skipper. And they are taking that out of the game, and I think it costs teams championships.
Let me ask you this. If Dave Roberts loses his job,
which I think is likely. Yeah.
When Dave Roberts loses his job, is it about the alrighty lineup, or is it about his woeful mismanagement of his pitching staff?
The latter.
I just feel like every year, these last 3 years, against the Cubs in the NLCS in 2016, against the Astros last year, and against the Red Sox this year, all 3 years, we have seen Dave Roberts make fundamental mistakes in the way he manages his ball club.
Right.
And I'm not talking about his lineups.
Well, like you said, having Kershaw close out Game 7 in the NLCS, I think he also had him, pitch late in odd positions in 2016. He has made some decisions, and it's a reason why I told you, Dad's not a big fan of him. And I was kind of like, what's the deal? But I don't have the same dislike that Dad has, but from a purely analytical standpoint, I am very unimpressed, and I think that they need to find a new voice in that clubhouse, and it needs to be a voice with experience. I'm not saying Joe Girardi, but they need to find a voice, and it may be, but an experienced voice needs to make their way to that ball club.
Does the guy who told Dave Roberts to start an alrighty lineup 2 games in a row in the World Series, does he lose his job?
It will not be publicized, but that analytics department for the Dodgers needs to be highly scrutinized. And I've told you that since Game 1 and Game 2. I highly, highly believe that. And that could be the only real impetus you have to let Roberts keep his job, is go that, man, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, what happened with him was because of what these guys told him to do. And also, you got to know the GM likely signed off on that and said, hey, we're doing it this way. at the end of it, he still answers to that general manager.
Yep.
And I hope, I mean, again, if the GM doesn't fire Roberts, that has to make ownership go, wait a second, hold up, wait a minute.
Some ain't right.
And so far, that's been the Dodgers in the postseason the last 2 years.
Yes, well, the last 3.
Yeah.
That NLCS against the Chicago Cubs should not have happened that way. Clayton Kershaw had probably one of his best postseason outings in his career in that NLCS in 2016. Pitched 12 innings, an ERA of 3. The only thing better was the NLDS the year before. He pitched 13 and a half innings, or 13 and 2/3, and had an ERA of 2.63. Both times he went 1-1. One of his best outings, I mean,
he's a 9-10, a sub 500 record pitcher in the postseason.
And he overused him. He absolutely overused him in that series. And the thing is not only did he absolutely overuse him, his overuse of Clayton Kershaw in that NLCS was just as egregious as the overuse of Aroldis Chapman. Just as egregious. We saw an Aroldis Chapman who was tired and lost after 60-plus pitches. And we saw a Clayton Kershaw who was just as tired, just as beat up, just as incapable after being used time and time again in unnecessary situations.
It's why the Bumgarner move worked. Because Bochy never overused him. He used him when he had to.
Right. And not only that, but one of the problems is that Bumgarner move did work. And because it worked, other skippers are like, hey, I got an ace that could probably do that. Well, I mean, I'm not trying to say that Clayton Kershaw can't do it. I'm not trying to say that Aroldis Chapman can't do it. But let's be honest about Madison Bumgarner. The guy is used to finishing. I mean, he's used to throwing 9 innings. The guy is used to throwing 125 or 130 pitches. And other guys just aren't. I mean, he has 25 complete games in his entire career, 15 of them for shutouts that Clayton Kershaw does. And that's since 2008. You turn around and you look at the guy who that they're basing this hopeful ability, who's been in since 2009, has thrown in a year less, has thrown nearly as many innings.
Yeah.
And
on the flip side, as we talk about Kershaw and Roberts, the guy that this series meant the most for is David Price. Price came in having never won a postseason game. His team had never won a game in which he pitched in the postseason. All that finally changed this year. He walks away with, I believe, 2 wins. He won Game 5, the deciding game, pitched outstanding in Game 5 when I think 7 full. It was awesome to watch him. He finally has that success, and that is what I said earlier. Without that, yeah, he won a ring, but he always would have been that guy, and to an extent, he still is. But he's at least finally had that moment. That is what Clayton Kershaw needs. Hopefully, he has it in LA, but he needs to go somewhere, win a ring, and have that moment.
So let me ask you this. When you hear this stat line, I want you to tell me the first pitcher that comes to mind. 2-0, a 1.98 ERA in 3 appearances, 2 starts, and 13 2/3 innings pitched. Gave up 7 hits, 3 earned runs, walked 1, struck out 10. I'm sorry, walked 6, struck out 10. A whip of .951.
Walked 6. See, I was going to go Justin Verlander there for a minute.
Walked 6, struck out 10.
Is that from this year?
Yes.
Walked 6, struck out 10. And how many? And that's the whole postseason, correct?
In 13 2/3 innings pitched in 3 appearances, 2 starts.
Walker Buehler.
That's David Price's World Series line.
Was it really?
To contrast that, 1-0 with a 3.38 ERA in two starts with a no decision in 10 innings pitched in 2 starts, and a 1.125 whip. That's David Price's ALCS line.
Yeah, I mean it's. I hope he gets again. I hope he gets a chance to make it back. If he stays with the Red Sox, I'm sure he will. And I'll tell you this: if all he needed was to get over that hump, then that makes him a very scary piece in the postseason from here on out. If that's what he needed was to get past that,
he threw an inning and 2/3 in the DS with an ERA of 16.2. He gave up as many earned runs in his inning and 2/3 in the ALDS against the Yankees as he gave up in the entire World Series in 13 2/3 innings.
If
he can maintain, if he really, because what he says is that he found himself in the bullpen.
That changeup. Right. Yep.
If that's the case, that makes that starting rotation of
Sale,
the Boston Red Sox
Price
a lot scarier.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, awesome for him. And at the end of it, congrats to the Reds. I mean, the Red Sox were the best team in baseball, by far the best team in baseball. Won the World Series, 2nd year in a row. I think we can safely say that happened. And just no, you don't think the Astros were the best team last year?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the Cubs were the best team in baseball in 2016.
Well, okay.
103 wins.
Sure.
They had their issues. Certainly.
Yeah.
They certainly had their issues. But I think they were the best team in baseball in 2016.
No, I agree. So
3 years in a row, we see the best team in baseball. And I like that. I feel like that's something that we don't get to say very often.
No.
Which is also fun to watch, but
no. At the end of it, I mean, it will go down as it'll be a memorable series for the 25 guys in that clubhouse. Aside from that, not so much,
and the few million Boston Red Sox fans.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, congrats to them. Another season in the books. We now have to just wait those long, painful 3 months until pitchers and catchers report, which is not that far away. I think just under 100 days, give or take. So looking forward to that in the middle of February. We are on vacation for a couple of weeks. I am going to go out of town, get away from work, get away for a little bit until right before the Thanksgiving holiday.
I am going to go out of town. I'm going to take my kid to Disneyland on Veterans Day weekend.
Nice.
So
with that, happy Veterans Day to everyone listening, to you as well. And if we get the awards coming out, we'll let you guys know if we end up doing a special show for that. Otherwise, once we both get back from a little bit of time off, we'll get right back into things like we always do. Take you through the off season, Winter meetings just around the corner, about a month and a half. So plenty of it to get to. Don't worry. We're not going away for long, just for a couple of weeks. Appreciate all hanging out with us. Thanks so much for listening to The Grueling Truth and thegruelingtruth.net. Be sure to like our Facebook page, Out of Left Field with Graham and Chris. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at @OOLeftField. And be sure to stop by thegruelingtruth.net for all of your sports needs. For all of us here at The Grueling Truth, Out of Left Field, guys, enjoy your November. Enjoy the next couple of weeks. We look forward to seeing you when we get back right here on Out of Left Field.